Hey, today I'm going to run through a demo of how you could take an existing Rails application and add a command line to it that streams over terminal wire. For this demo, I'm going to create a DNS registration kind of mock-up. Obviously, it's not the real thing, but it's something that everybody who has built the website understands. You've probably registered a domain, so if we go on here, we can register google.com or whatever. And then, of course, we can add DNS records. So I don't know, let's just set this to localhost, right? All right, not much to it. You get the idea. It's a quick thing to build, and it's something that you probably want to have a command line in this for more technical people to configure records, but for whatever reason, none of the DNS registrars really seem to have first-party command lines, which is weird. Anyway, let's switch into the code and let's see what we're up against here. All right, so first thing we want to do is, this is a Rails application. We're going to spin up the development server. It looks like it's going right here. All right, I guess just real quick, these are just scaffolds. I've already shown you what they look like. You can see the controllers here. So we have domains, and then of course we have DNS records. And just so you can kind of get a better understanding of the models we're working with here, a domain has many DNS records, and a DNS record belongs to a domain. Of course, they have some basic validations here. Again, this is not a real DNS registrar. It's just a couple quick data types to get us going so that we can play around with it. And I do want to show you how to get terminal wire installed in this thing. All right, now that we've had the quick tour of that, let's add terminal wire to this thing. And it installs pretty quick. So the first thing you want to do is go to terminalwire.com, go to the docs, and then you're going to find Rails. So we're using a Rails application. And then you just follow the installation instructions. So it's kind of what you'd expect, right? It's a gem. You install it on the server. We'll let that do its thing. And then, of course, there is a generator. And this creates a few files that we're going to get into. This is kind of where all the action happens in the CLI. All right, so we'll install that. The first thing we want to do, though, we don't want to call it my app. We're going to call this demo DNS. This is going to be the name of the command line utility that we're going to have our users run on their workstations whenever they want to do anything with demo DNS. Cool. All right, that generated a few files. Before I forget, though, we have to restart the dev server so that it picks up the new gem. All right, got to bundle that. Excellent. All right, let's see what files this thing created. We have a new folder in our Rails project called app terminal. Let me close these. This is actually where the command line application lives, which is kind of weird, right? It's living on a server. It's not on a client. I'll jump to that in a minute after we just start running the client for a little bit. All right, so these live on the server. The thing that actually is living on the client is this little binary stub called demo DNS. So let's run that. Bin demo DNS. And this is in our Rails directory. So this represents what your users will run to interact with your service. And this actually connects to the server and runs everything through there. But let's run it. I'm going to clear this, and we're going to see what happens. All right, so immediately we get some basic commands. And where are these commands coming from? If we open up main terminal, we're going to see where that happens. So you can see we have main terminal, which inherits from application terminal. Hello. And we could change this, right? So maybe instead of, well, actually, let's run this to make sure that it runs. All right. So demo DNS, hello world. And it says hello world. Maybe we're happy with that, and that's something we'd want to deploy. And then when a user's like, I don't want hello, I want it to be hi. So we could change that to hi and then run this again. And you can see that change is reflected immediately from the client. All right. So that's quickly like how this thing runs end to end. Another thing I like to show is what this binary looks like. Haha, I tricked you. It's not actually a binary. It is an executable though. So the cool thing that happens here, this is a binary. We have this binary called terminal wire exec. And this is the actual binary that's connecting to the server. Now, which server is it connecting to? The one that's specified in URL right here. So this URL is passed into this binary with whatever commands you run in here. So when you run hello world, it's actually running this thing, right? Because this is executable and it knows what arguments it has. And so terminal wire exec says, oh, hey, I got these commands, hello world, send them on through to this WebSocket. And now it's another file that was created. If we open up our routes file, we shall see that we have the terminal right here, right? So this URL matches up with /terminal right there. And then of course we have the main terminal, which has all the functionality that we saw in there. And then this just connects that to your application server via WebSockets. Connect is what WebSockets uses. So that's like a brief overview of kind of the plumbing that's going on here. One thing you'll notice that's missing is we did not have to create any JSON APIs or anything like that. The client is an extremely thin client, right? It's this 2-line thing right here. So whenever you make a change, that's why we don't have to update anything here. It's just streaming it from the server to that endpoint. Cool. All right. So with that brief tour, let's get cooking and let's start adding some basic functionality to this thing. And you know what? As we're building this out, I want to deploy it. So let's actually start doing that, right? So I do have this demo deployed to Fly. So if you go to demo.dns.fly.dev, you'll see all these domain names here. Takes a while to If it takes a while to boot up, that's because Fly is actually booting the entire Rails application to serve up the request. The initial request, I should say. Subsequent requests should be faster. I'm not sure what's going on here, but... All right, there we go. Now it's cooking. So we can edit the record. You get the idea. I didn't really need to show you how this DNS thing works, but let's go ahead and deploy this. And get that out in production, so we have some bits out there. All right, and while we're waiting for that to deploy, let's start updating the client because we want to add something that, you know what, we'll have it list domains. How's that? So bin demo DNS. Let's run that again. We don't need all these commands. We don't want hello, help, login, and who am I, and all that stuff yet. So let's just take this stuff out. And let's start with the first task, right? Domains. List all domains. Oops. I just remapped my keyboard, which is making my tab stuff a little tricky. You know what? A brief aside, you might be wondering, like, what is this that I'm coding in right now? It is Ruby, obviously. We're using the command line parser called Thor. Thor, you've probably used it. If you're a Rails developer, whenever you run bin Rails, it's actually running Thor. So what Thor does is it parses all the command lines. In this case, if nothing is passed, it does a lot for you, right? It gives you this help instructions. It just does so much for you to make your command lines look better. So if you've played with Rails, you've played with Tor, they have a really good website. Let's crack that open real quick. So if you go here, you can just glance through this and I think immediately understand what's going on. In this case, you see we have hello. That's exactly what I had in the terminal wire demo. And you can see kind of how this just gives you stuff here, right? You're used to running this locally, and the trick that I do is I run this thing on the server, and that's what this thing does. So whenever you include terminal wire Thor, it intercepts all of the calls like puts and gets and all that fun stuff. And instead of sending it to whatever the terminal is on that local machine to its standard out, it just sends it over WebSockets to that thin client. All right, let's get back to it. And I think now we can get cooking. All right, so we'll run bin demo DNS again. There's our new command, domains. It's just going to say listing domains, but we should actually have it list domains. So we're going to say domain.all.each do domain puts domain. And there we go. We have all of our domains. And I should be committing these, right? So add domains feature. Oops. Okay. I don't even need to push that up to Git. I don't know why I'm doing that. All right, but we should be deploying these. So let's run domains one more time. All right, so the thing that I want, cool, we can see our domains. I want to be able to register domains from a command line terminal. So let's build that feature real quick, and then we'll deploy this thing. Desk register a new domain. Def register. Okay, I guess we should put that up here. And fortunately for, interesting, this is tab and it's not. I don't know why that doesn't work. All right, well, domain.create. Let's do a bang so we can kind of see how exceptions are handled in development. All right, so we're going to do register. Now, something you'll notice, we didn't get to that bang, right? Because Thor caught that and it knows, like, hey, we have an argument called name. You need to send us an argument. So let's register google.com. All right, so nothing, that's good. That means it created it. Now we should get an error here. And we see a stack trace. Obviously, you wouldn't see this in production, right? You don't want to show stack traces, but since this is in a development environment, you will see the error and you'll see where the error happened in the stack trace. All right, so whenever we're building Rails controllers, the pattern that you usually see is something like this, right? So domain equals that. If domain.save, oh, I really wish tab worked. Domain registered successfully. For some reason, it works there. All right, so let's try that again. And now we should get a nice error message. And we didn't. Save for nil. Domain.name. What is nil about that? Undefined method save for nil. But those are the same. Oh, debugging is fun. All right. So main terminal register. We have, well, this should pass into that, but let's just do that just for fun. Okay. All right, nice. So not sure what went down there, but anyway, now we have this this error message, right? So, and this looks a lot like what you would expect in a controller. Your action is a command. You're passing parameters into this data. You're saving, and you either get a success or a failure. All right, let's deploy this. Something to think about that's, I think, kind of throws people off with terminal wire. All this stuff is happening on the server. So we are writing command line code, and you might be thinking like, oh my gosh, if this is running on the client, are they getting this data? No, because this is actually running on the server. What's running on the client is whenever we call these puts commands, whenever it's connected to that bin/demo DNS in our case, it's just streaming the standard out between the thin client and the server. So this is the only data that's actually leaving the server. Everything else stays on the server. You could think of this as like When a server emits HTML, similar to that, right? Except HTML is kind of one direction. It's just pushing HTML or serving HTML up to the client as a response to the request. It's a bit different. If you have a gets, like we might want to get somebody's name, there's some back and forth. So that's why Terminal Wire has to use WebSockets to handle certain things like gets. All right, so let's open this. And now I want to see what it's going to take to get this thing into production. All right, so we have the DNS records. All right, so the next question is, we have this application deployed, but if we look at demo DNS, this binary is still connecting to our local server. It's not connected to production. And we can do that, right? If we run demo DNS domains, we see that we have 4 domains here. So there's a couple ways of doing that. If we just personally want to see like, oh, hey, you know, how do we point this thing at production? What we could do is maybe we just make a copy of this and we call it like demo DNS prod. This is not how you would distribute it to your end users. We'll get to that just right after this. So we're going to change the URL to demo DNS fly.dev/terminal. That's where this thing's hanging out in production. We save that, and then if we run demo DNS prod, why did that go? I edited the wrong file. All right, let's undo that. And let's do this here. All right, so we have google.com. All right, and we also have an error message that it could not find a valid license. That's because Terminal Wire requires a license. Good news is licenses are free if you're getting started out and you want to use this thing. You'd only have to pay for a license if you're using this within an organization that makes over $100,000 a year in revenue or has over $1 million in gross assets. So this thing's built for obviously organizations of all sizes, but I wanted to make sure that people using this for personal projects or for smaller startups can just start using it right away. All right, so we have this URL here. This is actually our endpoint, and we need to license it. And this also gets into like how do we create an installer for the thing, which is pretty easy. And the quick answer for that is we're going to use Terminal Wire to do that. So what's fun is Terminal Wire actually uses Terminal Wire to create these things called distributions. And so in our case, we're going to create a Terminal Wire distribution create. And we call this demo DNS. The URL for this thing is that. So let's run that. So the name of it, we're going to call this demo DNS. The description, a command line DNS registrar. Cool. All right, so now we have demo DNS. All right, the next question is, how do you distribute this thing to your users? How do you get them to install it on their machines? Do you have to give them all these instructions? What exactly is going on here? How can you get this tiny little thin client onto their machine? And of course, you'd have to get the Terminal Wire exec runtime installed on there. And the good news is Terminal Wire makes all this very easy. So if you recall that distribution that you created, the installation instructions are just this little curl script here. So you would tell your users, hey, just run this on your machine, and then they restart the shell, and then they can run demo DNS, and that will work. So let's try that out. Run the bash script. And so what this is doing, it detects the operating system and the architecture it's running on. It downloads the Terminal Wire exec runtime for that. It creates a path, and it does all that fun stuff for your users. This is all stuff you don't have to do. You don't have to explain it to your users. All you have to do is give them this one-liner curl installer. And that's it. They might have to restart their terminal or run this command to get that working. But when that's all said and done, we should be able to type in demo DNS. And this is going to be hitting production. Now, it's taking a while to spin up again because the fly servers put the application to sleep. I should just turn that off so it doesn't go to sleep. All right, but if you run it right after, let me change that. Min machines running 1. Oops. There you go. All right. Okay, so again, we have our domains. We only have google.com there. All right, and let's go back to our production website. There's Google. All right, so domains. Let's register another one. I feel like maybe we should start a fruit company. So we register apple.com, and of course, when we go here, we see that. So that's pretty cool. And what's fun, if you want to see, am I using the right binary? What exactly was it the terminal wire installed? It throws it into this path. And of course, if we look at this, if we look at the source of this, you can already guess what's going to be inside, right? It's that endpoint, and it's pointing to terminal wire exec. And of course, it's hitting that server that's in production. All right. Another thing that you see quite a bit in command line applications like Stripe and GitHub is you can open stuff from your command line into your browser. So let's check that out. We'll do local, switch back to local. So demo DNS, domains. Let's make a command where we can say like open apple.com, and it takes us to that web page. All right, obviously that command doesn't exist yet because we didn't make it. So let's make it. Desk open. Desk means description. Open in browser. I need to see why my tab's not working. All right, so we do want the domain. And we're going to use browser.launch. And then URL4. And then, of course, we have to find the domain. So we got to find the model, right? Domain, find by name, domain. Oh, and we should put domain up here just so the docs reflect that. Okay, so domain, find by. And when we run this, you'll see that opens this in our web browser to localhost. So this is useful for a lot of things. If you need to do like some kind of authentication flow, you can just open a URL to your authentication, and when that's completed, then the person's logged in from the terminal. You can see how easily we're able to implement that, and let's deploy it to production, right? All right, so fly deploy. Hopefully it picks up our new machine settings too, so it doesn't fall asleep. All right, and you know what? While that's deploying, let's make this thing a little bit better, right? Demo DNS. All right, because if we open, say, like a domain that doesn't exist, it's going to crash, as it should, because no route matches that. So we want to do the thing again where domain equals domain find name, and then if that, oops, else. I wonder why my autocomplete tab doesn't work. I'll figure that out later. All right, so let's run this again. All right, so hopefully that's deployed. And let's run our demo DNS. Again, this is pointing at production, so when we run this, it should immediately pick up the changes. And there it is. So we now have the open command. And let's see what, again, domains we have on our server, and then we'll open it. So let's open apple.com. And there we go. We are at apple.com on our production website. Yeah, so that's, I think that covers the basics. There's authentication, which that just depends a lot on how you do it and how you want to do it in your web application. This demo really just shows how you can integrate a command line interface with your web application and go back and forth between the two in a way that's very nice. A DNS product is something that, like, a developer might want to change some records. They don't necessarily want to log in all the time to do that. Especially if you're managing a lot of different domains, it's just a lot of clicking around that you have to do. It'd be easier just to do it from a command line and script it. All right, so I think I'll end this segment by, again, going back to the docs on the TerminalWire website just to show you really how far that we went so far. So to recap, we have a Rails app. It was an existing Rails app in our case. And again, that's to show that you can plug this in very easily into a Rails app. Even if it was like a 10-year-old Rails app, it would plug into it pretty nicely. You just add the TerminalWire Rails gem, and that installs the stuff that you need on your Rails server to talk to the TerminalWire thin client. The generation command gives you what you need to get started. Again, the main terminal file and application terminal, and it hooks it up to WebSockets. And then what we were playing with is the Thor file, which is the open source command line parsing library that runs on the Rails server. And then, of course, you just customize it to do whatever commands that you want. And again, in our case, what I was showing is just some kind of quick CRUD operations. And I wanted to demo how easy that is to get set up. I also wanted to demo how whenever you make changes to it, you can deploy it, and there's no APIs or anything you have to worry about or update. Even if you already have existing APIs on your in your application, this is still a big deal, because if you want to add a feature or what have you, you don't have to worry about breaking your API. It's just your command line is separate from your API, and that's a good thing. You don't necessarily want those two things to be dependent on each other, because what you could end up in, or a situation you could end up with, is you go to change your command line, you need to add a feature to it, the API doesn't exist. Now you have to update your API, and you have to worry about, am I going to break all my existing client integrations? So you're just running these issues between API compatibility and the CLI that it's just not an issue with TerminalWire. So if we look at the table of contents on here, we just got through getting started for chapter 1. Did a few basic things. Sessions would be the next thing. So there's actually like a cookie store on the terminal, and it's a lot like Rails. It's an encrypted cookie, but instead of it being stored in a browser, it's just stored on your user's workstations. It's tamper-proof, so like if they can see the cookie, just the file, but if they open it, it's encrypted and it's tamper-proof. And then, of course, there's authentication, which is like, how do you implement login for your application? Standard I/O is what we demoed today. Files and directories. You can manipulate files and directories on the client's workstation if you have the right entitlements. So there's a whole security model behind the client that prevents the server from just doing whatever. And that's there, obviously, to make sure nothing crazy happens between the client and the server. We have environment variables, so if you need to read an envar from your user's workstation, that's also possible. But again, you need entitlements to do that. Web browser, we demoed that quite a bit, and also distribution and licensing. That's how we were able to publish the application and getting it up and running and installed with that curl script. So check it out. Go to terminalwire.com/docs. So check it out. Go to terminalwire.com/docs/rails. There you'll see the quick start for how you can get started, and in a very short amount of time, you can have a command line application up and running in production, and even distributed and running on your end users' machines.